know like how to feel because I'm recording a podcast. It's been like I can't even tell you how long ago I first thought about doing a podcast. A bunch of guys talked about it. Winston Lee, who is associated with HT24, we talked about doing a podcast. Some other coaches, and that's been like fast forward 10 years, and I'm sitting here in front of a board recording a podcast. Don't know what the hell I'm doing. This is our second take. I started a second ago and I wasn't even recording this. So here we are, and I think we're recording now. Like I think my first guest can hear me, but man, I'm
We're all
excited.
good.
When when I first started thinking about this podcast and found out it was going to happen, I called you and I was like, "Hey, you're going to be the first guest. Go ahead and be ready. I'm
I'm
so
in.
excited for it." So, and you were in, man. You were like,
I'm in.
Let's do it."
Let's do it.
So this is it, man. You know the drill with Wes Smith. That's me, obviously, in case you didn't know. We're here. I've got my guest, Brady Kennedy, with me. We're going to introduce you a little bit more out here in just a second. You guys are going to love him as much as I love him. I know it. It's great. A lot of information. Man, this is it. I feel like I need a sponsor, though. I still don't think we have a sponsor for this podcast. So if you're watching this podcast and you want to be a sponsor, wouldn't it be cool if we had like a bourbon sponsor?
That'd be amazing.
Like if Buffalo Trace or Knob Creek sponsored this podcast?
You got to go that big. I think you could just do
Heaven
a
Hill.
round. Heaven Hill or Kentucky Gentlemen. I don't know if we're. Let's start small. Let's start small.
So if you want to sponsor this podcast, especially if you are a distillery, produce bourbon, let us know. You're in. All right, we got you. You've got a spot reserved. Man, Brady Kennedy. I want to let everybody know before we completely jump in just who you are. Living here in Lexington, Kentucky, where this podcast is based out of. Brady, you've been around basketball for a long time, man. You played basketball. You've been around the game in I don't even know how many different roles you've been in the game with, but I know you've spent some time at the University of Kentucky, uh, and then you spent what 4 seasons there in the last role you had at least, right?
Yeah. I think it was 3. It gets kind of murky because of COVID, but yeah,
Yeah.
I think it was 3 full-time years along with 2 GAs and then 4 manager.
with
So
with what we know was some of the greatest staffs that John Calipari ever had in his 15 years here at Kentucky. You had John Robick on that staff.
we did.
He needs a show
We
to
did
sponsor the show. Could this show be sponsored by John Robick?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It'd be called the Robes Show.
The Robes Show. Yeah, we would I'd lose my name off of it, but that's fine. I would take it. Then you follow our good friend Joel Justice, who is currently the associate head coach at Ohio State. Hops down to Arizona, man, in the Southwest, and you head down there with him for a little while.
Yeah, went to the Heat. Definitely was not cold there, but it was a great time. Went down there and worked for Coach Hurley, which was great. Both Cal and him were great, but it was good to get a different experience there, and also in a fabulous city, big city, vibrant city. It was a great time.
And all in this process, man, you've gotten married, and like now
I
I'm
know.
married, and it's just like I don't even know how to feel about it sometimes.
I know. It was crazy, actually. There's a good story about that. I actually accepted the Arizona State job the same day that my engagement ring got shipped to the basketball office. And so
Really?
yeah, and then I went to plan the proposal within like a 2-day window, and then I flew out to Phoenix the morning after I proposed. So yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
That I
Life comes at
remember
you.
this now.
Life,
Yeah.
life comes at you fast, Wes.
It comes
Life comes
fast,
at you
man. It
fast.
comes at you fast. I'm starting to picture that or like piece it all together now. I remember the really
Yeah.
quick turnaround. Man, that's wild. That's wild. Uh, and you've been in. We're going to talk a lot today, Brady, about just basketball recruiting. You know, it's
Hmm.
a lot of things is going on here in the state of Kentucky with Kentucky basketball, especially with the University of Kentucky. Uh, I'm 34 years old. I lived through the John Calipari era for almost half of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so this was a big turnaround, and it's got a lot of buzz going. And we're about the 890,000th podcast to cover something about the turnaround and Mark Pope getting the job in the Pope era, but we're going to do it. Uh, and you're great at this because you've been in a recruiting role at both the University of Kentucky and Arizona State, so that's
Mm-hmm.
great. Um, but before we hop into that, man, I just want to throw out there too, because I feel like if we don't give them love, then who are we? What about the Bat Cats, man?
I know, man. They got hot.
They
I
got
was
hot.
pulling for it, man. It was exciting time. It was, you know what? It was being at Kentucky, obviously at the basketball world. I never got to experience the fandom side of when we went to a Final Four. We went to, you saw the videos. We'd be on the bus, we'd be on the plane, we'd see State Street going wild, we'd see Tenerife going wild, but never got to experience it. So it was cool to get a new perspective of that a couple weeks ago, right? Or last Saturday. They won that big game in Omaha, and we were eating with the garage doors up, and getting to experience that a little bit. So it was cool to see. The city was really buzzing about that, and I mean,
Yeah,
it was great. I mean, it was good to celebrate with great weather. Wasn't the cold, wasn't snowy, so it was a good time.
perfect timing. I've been a baseball fan. I feel like I've not been as big of a baseball fan as I would like to be. I think because I sucked at baseball. Like,
I did too. You know what? I was a pitcher, but I threw like 60 miles an
were
hour.
you a
But I
pitcher?
could put it wherever. I could put it whatever. But man, if you put that glove in the strike zone, I got drilled, man. I got drilled. I wasn't.
Were you like a?
What
Were
are your
you a?
thoughts, Wes? Let me ask you this: what's
Okay,
your thoughts about college baseball, metal bats or wood bats?
okay. You're gonna. This could take me down a rabbit hole. Okay, because I am so about making everything kind of similar. I have advocated for a shot clock in high school basketball here in Kentucky for
Absolutely,
a
I
while
agree.
because in college you have a shot clock. I was an assistant coach at Alice Lloyd College for a while, and one of the big things you wouldn't think this would make that big of a difference, but Brady, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I can't tell you how many times kids would we would recruit a kid, bring him to Alice Lloyd, and it was an adjustment because they had played maybe in southeastern Kentucky or another place and had held the ball for 2 minutes at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So to try to train them, no, we've got to get up the floor, we've got to get a play set up, we've got to
Mm-hmm.
get it all done in 35 seconds was a challenge.
Yeah.
And to me, that's my immediate thought when you ask wood or metal, because
Yeah.
I mean, why not just go ahead and go wood?
I mean, I agree. I mean, there's not. I mean, you see, it is interesting too, right? Because you see the best players in that age are getting drafted anyway, so they're going to go play with wood bats in the
Yes,
minors.
yes.
So these guys are still just as strong. It's kind of a little bit, uh, kind of a risk, right? If you're a pitcher and it's coming off that bat, I mean, it's buzzing.
I would
And
think so.
obviously, when I was a kid playing, I always needed to buy an expensive bat to make up for my lack of strength.
I don't know that I was ever in the batting rotation when I played Brady. I was that kid in little league, man. They stuck me like, hey, you Smith, go out there in center field,
No,
stand
you were
there,
right field, right field, right
right,
field.
yeah, that's
Center
probably more
field's
like
too
it.
important.
Yep, right field. And so I'm just back there, like picking daisies and dandelions because the ball never got hit out to me. So that was maybe that's why I don't watch as much baseballs because I just flat out
It's all
sucked at
right.
it.
It's all right. You can enjoy sports from a distance.
I will tell you this, and I'm curious to see if you agree. I've thought about a lot of times from college to professional, the biggest difference. And we watch college football and we watch some of the quarterbacks and we watch some of the wide receivers and even linemen and tackles and defensive guys, linebackers, all of that. Same with basketball. But Brady, I feel like the biggest jump from collegiate to professional might be baseball.
Yeah.
And I feel like the more I watch the College World Series, these are your best college baseball teams in the country. And defensively, I feel like I see a lot of errors and drop balls that you don't see in Major League
Hmm.
Baseball.
Yeah.
So I almost
Yeah.
feel like this could be like the biggest jump could be in baseball.
Yeah, I mean, it takes what is it, 4 levels to even get
Yeah.
to the MLB. I mean, I think the biggest difference, all these other sports, it's like size, right? Like athleticism, like football, like it's about strength mainly when it comes to like, that's why they don't let players go until 3 years to go to the NFL. Basketball, it's mixed skill and size and strength, right? And then, but baseball, if you can hit, I mean, I think a lot of it's pitching, right? Like,
Definitely.
there's for example. I mean, he's just skipped every level. I
Yeah.
mean, 5 tool. I
Yeah.
mean, he's just incredible. But I think the pitching. I mean, it's instead of a pitcher having 3 pitches in college, like these guys in the MLB got 5.
Right.
So
Right. That's crazy to think too. Like I'll you'll go to some of these high school baseball games and you'll hear, oh, so and so, the pitcher at Frederick Douglass, or I don't even know. I'm just making
mm-hmm.
schools up, is like really good, and you'll go and they'll pitch 7 to 9 innings the entire game, and then you're just
Yeah,
like, yeah, that's big difference
yeah.
when you're 35 years old and you're throwing
But
98 miles an hour.
I think if I was an MLB player, though, would there be any? There's not a better role on a professional team than I think like a middle reliever. Come and pitch
Oh,
1 inning maybe every couple days. Eat sunflower seeds.
you've got 1 inning not to screw this
One
up.
inning.
1 inning, 3 outs,
One
dude.
inning. Well now the relievers they got these intros when they walk in. I was at the Reds game Friday, and the lights turned off, and it looked like I felt like I was at an Alabama football game.
I would have to just cross my fingers and throw some, just some lofty pitches in there, and just hoping it's some fly pops out close to the fence and that they don't go over. That'd be my only chance.
That's hilarious. That's funny.
Uh, yeah, man. It was crazy for Kentucky. I hadn't seen that. I don't. I love going to a Reds game at Great American Ballpark or Kentucky Proud Park in Lexington. Watching a baseball game live is unbelievable to me.
Yeah.
But I've just never been a big sit down watch it on TV. I'll flip it over and look at the score. Oh, the Reds are losing again. Okay, and then I'll flip it back over. But man, like you and I and some other people we know, we went out to Shamrock's Bar and Grill the other day to watch the matchup against what game did we watch? Was that
A&M, I
A&M?
think.
That was the A&M game. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just like, if you remember, we had to wait on a table. There was no one in the restaurant that wasn't wearing blue except for this one weird ass dude in a green shirt. But I gave him credit because it's an Irish pub, I guess, right? So,
Shamrocks, man.
hey,
Yep.
so I mean, we'll give him that. But just the atmosphere, I've never seen that with baseball in
No.
Kentucky. But
And I think Wes, I think the biggest thing too is the weather. It was awesome.
yes, yes,
You would win or lose, and you walk outside and it was warm. It
warm,
wasn't.
yeah.
I mean, it was great. It was buzzing though. You're right.
Great atmosphere. We even got to check out a real cool like modified golf cart car outside. That was kind of fun too.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
That was amazing. That's great advertising. Maybe they want to advertise the podcast.
Hey, yeah, if you're a realtor and you drive a really cool modified golf cart car that costs like 40 grand, we'll sponsor the show.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I do want to. I want to get back to you for a second because you're a guest on the show. I don't want to just sit on here and bullcrap with you the whole day and not even get to spotlight you, Brady. So I want to pick your brain for a little bit, and I want everybody to know. I mentioned this earlier. You have a recruiting background in college basketball. You understand the ins and outs, and this is first of all, what explain to me, explain to everyone what was your job
Yeah.
at UK. We don't know what you did. What overview, a general idea. What did you do?
Yeah. So my roles at Kentucky and Arizona State was very similar, with a little bit more responsibility at Arizona State because staff was a little bit smaller. At Kentucky, from a recruiting standpoint, I was really dialed in on the recruiting, like organizational type stuff. So really keeping tabs on everybody we had on our board, whether it was where they were visiting, intel gathering, organizing official visits. That was very critical. I mean, really everything that involved the recruiting process, making sure we're contacting kids at the right time, who we're contacting. There's a lot that goes into recruiting that people don't really realize. Like, obviously, you see out there people going to games and things like that, but there's a lot of like rules around it that you got to make sure the staff follows. And I think that was really kind of how I fit into. The staff doesn't have, I mean, every college staff, they're running around a million miles an hour. You're kind of just treading water your whole career, right? And then some more help around figuring out and working around the rules to keep track, because you can't just go see a kid 100 times a year. Like, there's definitely limitations. So to make sure that all of our T's are crossed, I's are dotted, that's kind of where I came into play. But also on the flip side, like, I was involved in like a lot of the creative stuff. So figuring out how social media we can relate to the kids. I think that's where Cal was so good at, was appealing to the recruits. Like, he really dialed into the recruits and how do we become this cool. You saw it with Drake. You saw it with these other things that he was really good at keeping the recruits in the back of his mind, that everything was dialed toward that. So just bringing all of that creativity to the recruiting side of things and figuring out, like, how do we run this elite recruiting operation but stay incredibly organized.
And it's amazing to think, with that role, I think one of your years at Kentucky with Cal, was it 2020, was that you brought in a number one recruiting class at Kentucky?
I think that was Tyrese
Yes,
Maxey.
yes, I think
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
So just incredible to think, and to understand, a lot of us from the outside, even people with coaching backgrounds. I was at Alice Lloyd College in AIAD two at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't really understand. NAIA is like, how would you describe it? Like the freedom, like you talked about all those regulations and things you can't do, and how you have to make sure that the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted.
Yeah,
I feel like NAI is not anything like that. If I
yeah,
wanted to go talk to a kid, hell, I jumped in the car and I went and I took him out and I bought him a
yeah,
beer or something. Obviously a lot different. So a lot of people don't understand exactly everything that has to go into a recruiting
yeah,
process.
yeah,
Um, and you're sitting here telling us your role, and you're not the only person that has a job dedicated to recruiting. So just the amount of effort and strategy and thought that goes into it is really, really just amazing. You mentioned social media, and is there, and you mentioned obviously Cal's really good with that. He's got guys like Drake, you mentioned, for instance, that
yeah.
are all over social media with Cal, and Cal's posting pictures with Drake, and Drake's posting pictures at Kentucky, and they're at his house. But what what all ways is social media used? Because I feel like social media is so big in the lives of everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm recording a show that's going to be pretty much through social media on podcasts. Um, what kind of a role does that play, not only from a coaching standpoint, but from a recruit standpoint?
I think the biggest thing is social media. It's exactly kind of like you see advertisements on TV, right? Like, you just want to consume that player's mind with your school. So the more cool stuff you can be in front of them, the better. You want them only thinking Kentucky or whatever school you're with, Arizona State. I'd say it's changed, and maybe we're going to get into that a little bit later. But um, when I was in college basketball, that was a big part. It was okay. How do we appeal to the kid? Whether it was putting out a new like when I was there, like, we got a lot of Nike Elite gear that nobody else got, right? So we want to push that out. We got custom like LeBron, so we had elite facilities, like we had that was our strength, along with the Kentucky fans. So whatever your strength is, you wanted to push that out, and you wanted to make it sure that it was out for a long time and in front of them. Um, but really just creating and building that brand. Kentucky was easy. I mean, the brand's there.
Absolutely.
So really it's just in a roundabout way, like, and I know those big brands, you're really competing with those blue bloods. That's who we were going to war with. because those have the typical they have a similar fan base. So that's who we were really battling on the social media realm most of the time.
Gotcha. Yeah, I like that you mentioned brand because I do think that's something that's gotten brought up a lot since the departure of John Calipari and the hire of Mark Pope is how much of the brand is it really, and how much does the brand matter? How big of a brand is Kentucky? And I think that's become pretty evident that the brand does matter to an extent, and I think that Kentucky is still obviously one of the top brands. I know I felt a lot better when we went after Dan Hurley just to find out that he's also going to turn down the same deal we offered to go to the Lakers. I'm like, okay, so it's not just Kentucky that he didn't want to come to. He legit
Yeah,
wants to stay at UConn. So,
yeah.
but yeah, just knowing that brand. But all right, when I was an assistant coach at the NAIA level, um, every year with recruiting, I would have a whiteboard, and Coach Hammond gave me this responsibility. Bless his soul. I don't know what he was thinking, but I enjoyed it. I asked for it and I got it. But I would have a whiteboard. I would have our roster up here. What we're losing, what we're building, where we're weak at, where we're strong at, and I would try to make it like a puzzle. Um, and I would usually start. We didn't have a great recruiting budget at Alice Lloyd. I couldn't hop on a plane and fly to Vegas and watch a kid. Um,
You
I want put Joe Step, put me on that plane. Let's get on a plane. Let's go out here to Vegas. I promise you, I'm not going to gamble. I'm not going to be at any place I'm not supposed to be. All right, I might hang out at the pool at the Venetian for a little bit, or the place I'm talking about, whatever the other place. But
Encore.
Encore, I'm not going to be watching the chain
And if
smokers.
chain smokers are playing, you might stay a little longer.
But I'll come back with a kid. Promise. But we didn't have that. So, one of my things, what I would start out by looking at film or looking at stats and finding kids that I thought might fit the role. And I
Mm-hmm.
would try to reach out to them either via social media or an old school, like lick the envelope letter and put it in the mail and send it out. And then once I got a word, I would try to see them, try to go watch them or watch more film and figure out if they really fit that role. And we would go from there. Obviously, it's a lot different at the NCAA Division I level, especially at a blue blood school like Kentucky or even in Arizona State for that matter. How does it start at that level?
Mm-hmm.
Where does it begin?
Uh, First of all, like there's a million kids, right?
Yeah.
You see, I mean, you look at John Morant, who I don't know if you were with. Did you go down to Moorhead when he played at
Yeah.
Murray?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, there is just thousands and thousands of kids out there that are just trying to showcase themselves. Some are fortunate enough to get seen on the EYBL Adidas circuit. There's some that are just as good that just never get seen, right? So I think the biggest thing is casting your net as far as you can. So that's where relationships come in. So every assistant and staff member obviously had relationships all over the country, and you're getting called saying, "Hey, you need to check out this kid, and you need to go check out." So you do your best to kind of organize your schedule. And that's kind of where I came into play. Like, where can we go? And you know what? And like Kentucky was a little bit different. We had all the resources, recruiting budget that we could just go jump on a jump on a flight, go see whoever.
You could be
But
at the
Arizona,
Encore pool party tomorrow if you
yeah.
needed to.
In Arizona State, though, we were very much budget conscious. Like we were flying places. Like we feel really good about a kid. But I think the casting the net side of things is people forget like these 247 rivals, people with scouting services all over the country that people don't even know, like whether they've got like a Georgia guy or there's like a Texas guy. Like that's where those kind of resources that I bet you people don't even realize like schools pay for those resources to have different quote unquote like recruiting eyes in different areas. So that's kind of where it starts. And so you basically build your board off that, and then you've got the live period. So um, you go visit the EYBL, Adidas, Under Armour. There's independent leagues as well. Um, but you go and see all those kids, and then it's kind of you just if you just evaluate, and then the coaches come back, relay the information, and then kind of like you said, you put the whiteboard up and you figure out who's going, who's coming, and then also you got to figure out your own roster, who's leaving, who's going, where does this player fit? If this player does stay, do we need this kid? And so where it starts is really you're trying to talk to as many people and then go and watch. That's kind of where it starts.
And talking about that number, you mentioned casting your net. At a school like Alice Lloyd, I had 6 scholarships. I might throw out and almost essentially offer 50,
Yep.
knowing that the majority of those are going to get turned down. And I feel like obviously at a school like Kentucky, and we get frustrated about this a lot, me included. We'll say, well, why have we not offered this kid, or why have we not talked to this kid? Do you have to shorten your net a little bit at Kentucky just
Yes.
because
Yes.
a
Yes.
scholarship that's going to get turned down might
There's
not
two
exactly?
things. Kentucky, there's two things, right? It's a double-edged sword when it comes to recruiting because you offer a kid and you offer him, he may accept it on the spot, right? And then
Yeah.
you're in a tough spot. So you also offer a kid, and the kids that we're recruiting, it could make another kid mad, or it could make a kid on your roster mad. So like you got to be very selective, like, and that's where Kentucky we did all the intel work on like who when we recruited a kid, was he either like you bet like we went down the path with it, like we had to make sure we were right about the kid, as a person mainly, but also as a if he could play. Last thing I wanted to do was go after a like your offer your third option center, and then your top 2 centers on your board are like, nope, I'm looking elsewhere since you offer this. So it's different. It's a double edged sword, and you got to kind of work through that. And you just gotta go with your gut, really.
That almost jumps me right into, obviously we're going to talk about the Pope era and the hiring of Mark Pope. Something that keeps coming to my mind, Brady, on Twitter, I kept seeing this calendar get flown around about 2 weeks after the hiring of everything that had happened at the University of Kentucky in a 2 week span. From
Mm-hmm.
John Calipari announcing he's leaving, to us talking to Hurley, us talking to Drew, us talking to blah, 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 hiring Mark Pope. And it was crazy all at once. It was just like a whirlwind. And I keep going back to, you were there. Me and you were both there at the press conference after the hiring of Mark Pope. We stood in line in a 4 wide line around Rupp Arena to get in there, and the atmosphere is crazy. But I'm sitting here thinking, like, at the time, on the roster when Mark Pope's hired, we have who? Grant Horn?
Yeah, there was only a few. There's only a few, and you know what? That's not crazy to think, though, man. The way Cal did and operated, we had so many guys go in the league. It wasn't too out of the ordinary, to be honest with you. Like we were so used to players going to the NBA, and Cal did such a good job, um, developing players and bringing players in to get them to that next level. Like it really wasn't. At least it didn't stick out in my mind. I'm used to it. Like Cal
Yeah.
did such a good job at getting these guys to play together, and all of them leave to go do what they needed to do and go to their ultimate dream, right? So yeah, you're right. No, you're right. It's
Well,
kind of crazy.
I was sitting there thinking, like there was some guys in limbo. Like nobody really knew what Thiero was going to do at the time. And there were some guys, maybe you keep. But I remember sitting there thinking, I'm like, we've got Horn. And I can't even remember the situation with Derbyshire at the time. And like, we've got a few guys that were like, okay, at least we've got a guy. Don't know how much of a guy he is. We've got a guy. Uh, Sorry, I shouldn't say that. But I'm sitting there thinking, and it's so crazy to me. You talked about this process, and you talked about casting your net, and you're talking about how you've got to be. This kid may accept the offer on the spot, and then you may have these 4 guys, and you offer this guy, and he gets mad. I just can't imagine having to fill a roster from zero, scratch, nada,
Mm-hmm.
in that amount of time. Um, and I think, obviously, within 2 weeks, after 2 weeks, 14 days of the hiring of Mark Pope, we had, this is what we had, okay? We had Cody Fugger. Is that how you say his name, Fugger? I'm still learning.
I'm not sure.
We had Jason Hart, we had Mark Fox, and we had Alvin Brooks. And those are all coaches, but we pretty much had that locked in. I think Brooks was probably the last of those, right? I think we officially
I
announced.
think so.
And we had 4 players. We had Colin Chandler, Amari Williams, Travis Perry, and Lamont Butler. And I can remember at that point in time, like subscribing to the Trilly Discord, being on Twitter, like 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 refreshing, trying to see like
Really?
guys like who are we gonna get? You know, waiting on the boom tweets. But how does that look, Brady? Like you know this process. Is it just what you explained times 50, trying to
Yeah.
fill one so quick?
The portal, the portal for a fan is crazy. Like keeping up with it on social media, but really being in the portal as a job, it's almost unbearable, to be honest with you. I feel for every staff right now, even still, right? Like it's it is almost, I don't want to say impossible, but it's almost impossible to stay organized in this portal. Kids are going in. You got to figure out who's in, who's already committed somewhere. I mean, a lot of these things go on behind the scenes a little bit more than you think. What's status? But I will say, in today's age, it's so much easier. It's still hard, but it's so much easier for a coach to come in and fill a roster of his type of people than it was 10 years ago. Because 10 years ago, you took a job and the kids were staying and you may not have recruited them. So you were kind of having to work with different personalities and different guys that you just didn't really know. And then you had to earn their trust. And so that's why I think some of these jobs that come open, mid-major, low-major, depending on the situation, it's a little bit easier. You can come in and you can pull kids from different spots. Because I think right now there's still like 45% of kids that went in the portal. They're not even finding a home yet.
Yeah.
So it's crazy because, and I got to experience it a lot at Arizona State before I left, and you got to act quick. I mean, if you're not contacting the kid within 24 hours of him going in, he may already found a spot. So you got to act quick. You got to get him on campus ASAP, get it done, sign. And the crazy thing is no one knows about, it's not over until they come to campus and accept financial aid. They
So
can
you can
commit
be
and they can commit, they can sign the transfers that I don't know if anybody, even some people may, but they sign the NLI. They can only sign an and I get NIL and NLI now confused, but
yeah.
NLI, that's signed for a freshman, so a kid out of high school. So that locks you into your school. You can't go anywhere else. But as a transfer, you sign this conference agreement. You can't sign a NLI. So you really are only locked into that school and that conference. So you can't transfer in conference unless you get that waived, or like when you get let out of it. So
like
and
like in the
so
situation with Trent Noah to an extent with South Carolina.
yeah, yeah. And so he got let out of his NLI, so he could go wherever.
And
And then
just so
obviously,
everybody's clear, when we say with everything going on with NIL, and you mentioned getting confused,
yeah,
it's switch 2 letters around.
yes,
When we say NLI, we're meaning our national letter of intent,
yes,
not name, image, likeness, which is NIL. Two totally different things. So just so everybody understands, no, we're not dyslexic. Maybe we are, but we totally understand what we're saying. It's NLI was what Brady's talking about here.
yes. And then obviously when coaches changed, you're able to get out of it too, right? So you saw some of Cal's guys go to Arkansas. That's in conference. They're able to do that. So,
So, and just thinking about this, and it makes it even more interesting. I think where you said they can transfer, and they can commit and they can sign whatever, but until they get on campus and accept financial aid, you've still got 15 little birdies in their ear talking to them. and
Exactly.
they can back out of that. How interesting. What about the situation we almost got ourselves into, Brady, where um, what if Hurley takes the Lakers' job?
Mm.
You've got back to back national champions with a really good roster for this incoming season. And most, at least big time schools, have used the majority of their NIL money at this point. They filled up their scholarships almost at this point. And then all of a sudden, you've got a coach that leaves that opens the door for these guys to, like you said, with a coaching change, go wherever they want.
Yeah.
How
It,
does that get?
it would have been, if that would have happened, I don't know. I mean, that would have been like the equivalent of like, I mean, Cal did it. He just did it 3 weeks earlier, a month earlier. I mean, it would have been the same exact thing, except this late. I mean, it would have been crazy because you're right. Rosters were set. Money has been probably direct deposited already on some of these kids. Like, you would have had a lot of kids on that team that one were good enough to go start anywhere else in the country and take people's spots, but two, I mean, I hate to say it, but they're expensive kids. Like,
Absolutely.
they're going to be able. Their price tag was going to be big, rightfully so. I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
good players on that team, and that's just the day and age that we're in. Like, I don't know. I don't know where I could have seen honestly a lot of those kids staying. I think they would have probably hired an assistant to keep those most of those kids, but there would have been a couple kids that probably would have bounced.
Well,
So
and you're probably, I agree with you. I think a lot of them stay. And not only for the fact that it's UConn and you did just win back to back national championships, but also for that reason, you might not be able to get the offer, make the money somewhere else that you're going to make at UConn. And
mm-hmm.
probably there's a good chance you're not going to find anywhere as prestigious as UConn to go at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
And saying that, a lot of people were really frustrated. And listen, when I say a lot of people, and I say that a lot, I mean my ADHD frustrated ass too gets really frustrated with, during this whole hiring process, we're going to offer Mark Pope. Why are we not talking? Why don't we wait on Billy Donovan? How much of a factor was recruiting in the speed of the hire? Do you feel like? And I'm not
I think
saying that Mark Pope was. I'm excited about the Mark Pope. I have wanted for a while our next coach after Cal to be somebody that this program meant something to, that played here, was invested. So don't get me wrong, but just for those who still were a little bit unsure about Mitch Barnhart's process, does it play a role with recruiting?
I think speed in this day and age is critical. But I do think um, waiting, you're taking a risk, but also I think there's a risk in every hire, right? Like, even if I think if you hire, like, if Dan, I mean, you would have seen if Dan Hurley would have got hired at the Lakers, that's a risk. Like, even the best coaches anywhere in the country, it's a risk. So I think you just got to weigh. I think ADs. I'm not obviously an AD. I'm not. I don't think I'm nearly as smart to be an AD ever, but I
Me
think
either.
Mitch. I trust Mitch, and I worked obviously in the athletic department with Mitch, and trust that he must have felt something in his gut when he had the conversation with his people and with all of the people he interviewed that was the best move. And I think once you know about something, and it's probably he just had a feeling, and I do think speed though is a little bit critical because Billy Donovan could have been playing in the playoffs for another month if he would have won.
Yeah, yeah, and that's an unknown. You don't know that. Like,
It's an unknown, and you don't know if he would take it. I
yeah.
mean, you have no idea. So
And while that thought was great, I think one of the things that pushed me to be, and I did not expect Mark Pope's name to be announced. That if I would have put together a list of top 10 guys that I think Mitch Barnhart reaches out to, he would not have been there. I just didn't even think of it. Once he was mentioned, I was cool with it, just for that fact. I wasn't. I would have been happy with the Hurley hire, but there was also a part of me that's like, this guy just won back to back national championships. He is going to have a cockiness, a a walk about him that I wasn't sure we needed at the time to follow John Calipari at Kentucky, uh, and rightfully so. He should. He won back-to-back national championships, and I'm not saying he would have been like that. I think Hurley's a down-to-earth guy. I think he's great, but almost humbling ourselves to go to someone who, and Mark Pope's proven himself to an extent, but not at this level. But to give somebody that opportunity that the university means something to, I think it's pretty evident at this point what UK means to Mark Pope. He stresses it every time he talks, and I think that's great. I think that's great. I was for Scott Drew. I really wanted that hire. Me and you had talked about that as early as the state tournament about how we figured that was going to be one of the top options, uh, and I was really okay with that. And I feel like with Mark Pope, you have that similar sort of hire. I feel like there's a lot of similarities with Scott Drew and Mark Pope, uh, and I don't know. I'm excited about it. What's your thoughts? How many games are we going to? Are we going to be excited? Or are we like,
All right, or are we going tin roof cocktails or
yeah,
there?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
No, I think first and foremost, I think Cal did a great job. I mean, his
absolutely.
run, his run. I mean, I don't know if anyone can really top from a what he did, especially those first 5 years where
Oh
he
my
just
gosh.
completely turned around it. He did like he turned around the program, but also just I don't know if there's anybody that's created a buzz like he has. Master marketer, master recruiter, um, and he honestly like he had that thing rolling so much. He created a standard that nobody can keep up with. I mean,
Yep.
the Kentucky job, and people say it all the time. The Kentucky job's hard enough as it is, and then he made it so much harder because of the expectation that he put on P fans. So like if he had his third recruiting class, people thought he was slacking. It's like no, like and before I get into like the Pope hire, like you forget the game changed like three different times when Cal was there. Like
Yeah.
you had like when things changed, right? You had um, G League Ignite come into play, Overtime Elite come into play. So they were taking some kids that Cal would have gotten. A kid like Jaden Hardy, who's now with the Mavericks, kid like that, right? Like there's some kids because I mean you look at his previous teams. Who's to say Anthony Davis wouldn't have maybe went to G League? I mean, you just don't know.
Yeah.
But that was a whole other layer of things. But also COVID, I mean, just completely crushed college basketball and college athletics as a whole. That was just a nuts. And then so a bunch of different stuff kind of changed now, NIL and all that. But he just set a standard that was insane to
Yeah.
keep up with.
Yeah.
And he had really, really good years at the back end of his career here. It was nuts. But I think the hiring of Coach Pope, um, I think it's a win-win. I think Arkansas is getting a heck of a coach in
Yeah.
Cal, and I don't think he's done. I think I
I
wouldn't be
agree.
shocked if he's in a Final Four in the next
Yep.
2 or 3 years.
Same.
Coach Pope, clearly alumni here, brings a whole new, different kind of aspect to the program. Just being an alumni is just different. You can tell by his passion for the school, passion for the fans. He's already been here once, so he's kind of
Yep.
recouped everything. But I think he's going to do a great job as well. And he's going to have the fan base behind him, just like they did with Cal. So
Yep.
I think both parties are going to do a great job. So I don't think there's any doubt in that.
I agree. If anything else, this is been really good for the game of college basketball, especially the SEC. I think because I'm like you, I have a lot of respect for John Calipari. When he was hired at the University of Kentucky in 2009, is that right?
I know what 22,
Oh, I
23.
was little. I was a little guy, and that's like I, I'm not that old, Brady. Damn. Let's see.
19?
19, yeah, 22. 19, I couldn't even drink yet, Brady. I wasn't asking for bourbon sponsors for this podcast when Coach Cal was hired. Uh, but I don't think there was a better person in the world for the job when John Calipari was hired. Uh,
No.
I worked at a shoe store in London, Kentucky, a family-owned shoe store in London, Kentucky, and we sold some apparel. And I can remember those years. You remember when those T-shirts came out for the tournament, the Sweet 16, Elite Eight, the Final Four T-shirts, and we would open at like 6 a.m. and literally have a line of people waiting to purchase those T-shirts. So just like you said, the energy he brought around this program at the time was unbelievable. And I agree with you completely. I don't think he's done either. I think a John Calipari with a something to prove, and to a guy that wants to go out on top when he is finished, is dangerous.
Yeah,
It's going to be great.
He is so good with his back against the wall.
Yes.
Like, I mean, there's been times, I mean, in the recruiting, like, man, you kind of feel, we've all felt that in recruiting, even probably when you're out slow, you kind of sit back and you're like, oh gosh, what are we going to do with this position or whatever? And you know what? It happened with us during COVID. We were looking for a center. It's when we got Olivier Sarr. If you remember, we lost on the kid from BYU, I think is what it was, the tall lefty. I forget his name. But we lost on him, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like what is – because the portal wasn't the portal yet, really.
Right.
It was grad transfer. So we're like – I'm sitting there like, oh my gosh. Sure enough, man, Cal locks down Olivier and makes it all good like nothing happened. You know what I mean? And so he is really, really good with his back against the wall. And I think he'll have a new energy, I think, there to get that fan base up and going. So –
well, I'm excited for Arkansas to call the Hogs a few more times here this year. I wish John Calipari the best of luck, and I wish Mark Pope the best of luck. Maybe Mark Pope a little bit more luck than Coach Cal, but
it's gonna be fun. SEC is really good.
Yeah,
I mean, you top to bottom. I mean, it's
Alabama.
Yeah, they got Alabama. What else? You got Alabama, Arkansas, Kentucky. Tennessee's always tough. Rick Barnes, heck of a coach.
Yep.
But we got football season before.
Football season's coming up.
We got
tailgates. I'm so ready. I just went to the mall earlier and bought a couple football shirts. I'm excited. I'm ready for some tailgating. So it's going to be a good time. Brady, listen, thank you so much for joining me on I guess this would be considered the inaugural episode.
What's your podcast name?
You Know the Drill. The Drill with Wes Smith. We're here. And, man, I appreciate you being on here. And you never know, you may be back on here again.
Anytime you need me to join, man. Maybe I can be like your intern or something.
Oh, I love it. I'll probably be your intern by the end of this, but that's okay, too.
Well, I'm happy to join anytime. I had a good talk with you, and you're going to absolutely crush it on this podcast, and I can't wait to get you a sponsor and keep watching.
Yes. If you see me on here the next week with a red Solo cup or a bourbon glass, I found a sponsor for the show. I'm totally kidding, maybe. But anyway, Brady, thank you, and look forward to the next time, man.
Definitely.
Listen to this episode. Make sure you tune in for the next one as well. Thank you all for listening. Ever how many of you do end up listening to this, thank you for listening, and go Big Blue.